Hi, my name is Jennifer Rockacharlie, and I am a 7th grade life science teacher at Henderson Middle School in Atlanta, Georgia. Henderson is located in DeKalb County, and Henderson is also located within the perimeter of Atlanta. So my students represent a very diverse group. We have over 80 different languages spoken, and I believe we have 100 different countries represented, roughly about. I have about 120 students. I have 2 gifted classes of students. I have 1 special education inclusion class, and I also have 1 general education class of students. And each class ranges from about 22 to 27 students. So I have kind of a smaller class load, but some of my classes are very large. So the problem that led me to create a project-based learning capstone proposal for Kennesaw State University's Instructional Technology Master's Program was that Henderson has a really low rate of students passing the science portion of the Georgia Milestones test. So in 2015, on the Georgia Milestones scores, we only had 44% of students actually meet or exceed the science standards, which is really poor when you think about it. Only 56% of our students have an inadequate knowledge of science content. And so the hope was that doing project-based learning as a capstone project and utilizing technology would help students better engage in science content and perform better on the Georgia milestones. So the goals were to be able to make deliverables that the students could actually use to project their learning. The idea was that if students are actually going to create something on their own and then have to share that with others, specifically adults and specifically to a public audience, that they would work harder on figuring out the information and trying to actually learn what it is that they're supposed to be learning. So my students were given the goal of actually being able to solve a disease issue. So students were given a project called Is It Genetic that I was able to find from the Buck Institute for Education Online. They have an incredible resource database where you can find different project-based learning activities for different grade levels and for different subjects, and some are even interdisciplinary, which was really incredible for me to find after doing so much research on project-based learning and the effectiveness of project-based learning with teaching students. Basically, the idea behind project-based learning is that students are having to explore content on their own. They're creating some kind of deliverable, whether it's actually creating a product, creating a design method, a marketing strategy or plan. In this case, they acted as doctors, fake doctors, but they were to identify a certain disease based on symptoms shown. So my students were given a list of several symptoms that were kind of strange. Some of them included lethargy, high-pitched crying of a sweet little baby, pain when pressing on the lower abdomen, vomiting, frequent crying, lethargy, hypotonia, and frequent urination. And so the students were given a background description of the parents, the family involved, and how the parents had had a child with similar symptoms die at 2 months of age, and they had a second child, and they were Mennonites, and all of these other background descriptions were given, and the students had to take the information and then act as doctors. And so they were given very specific instructions for how to figure out what to do. They were told to remember that they're going to be presenting this information to the parents in the situation, and so they had to come up with a way to share the information about how that child's life would be different, if that child would even live, and what they would need to do to help that child succeed to the best of his ability with his health. But they had to create a way to share that gently with parents. So that was their goal. And it was kind of daunting for them. I had my students in 4 different groups of 3. So we have something called extended learning time, where it's an extra focus on the content of whatever the teacher teaches. So for me, it's science. And so I had 12 students that I kind of used as guinea pigs for project-based learning and gave them this assignment. They were actually going to present to real people. So I had real teachers come in that they didn't know. And these teachers were given a description of what was going on, and they were given that background information, and they were to act as parents. So my students had to actually figure it out. I gave them lab coats they put them on to feel like doctors and to share this information. So I want to share with you a brief description of what my students shared. Ultimately, they had to come up with some kind of way of presenting. Some of them chose PowerPoint. Others chose something called Storybird, which ends up allowing them to create an online picture book of sorts. And then they're able to detail descriptions that go along with the pictures to explain the story. And some of them even chose to use the pictures to share their findings and to share their actual diagnosis with parents through Storybird. But I interviewed 2 of my students after. I'm going to play the audio. I'm not going to show the clip as to just protect their privacy. But I asked them originally, how was this project different from other projects? And so the description or the answers that you're going to hear from these 2 girls starts by answering the question of how is this different?
It was different because it was more interactive, and we also got to pretend like there were parents in front of us, and we had to explain to the parents what their child's disease was.
Okay.
It was more, yeah, it was basically a lot more.
They got nervous.
It's basically what you said, because
It's okay. How did you use technology for this project?
we used computers to type in all the diseases and then see what came up, and we also used our phones to do the same thing.
Yeah, we typed in all of the symptoms and diseases to find out how the child was different and how to find out what was wrong.
Yeah. How did you share your presentation with the class? What technology did you use?
We used a PowerPoint presentation to discuss how the certain types of diseases would affect the kid.
Awesome.
So that's just a brief description from 2 of my students who completed the project and what they thought about it. And they were a little bit nervous to share at first, but they got a little bit more comfortable. So going with the evaluation of the actual project, they were given a rubric that described every question that they had to answer. It also described the presenting skills that I wanted them to master and what I was going to grade them on in that regard. And I was more lenient in their presentation grading because I know that they can get nervous, but the content was graded heavily, and most of my students made at least a B. The ones that kind of waited till the last minute to do it were the ones that made a B. The girls that I interviewed definitely made 100. They worked really hard, and they owned it. They looked like doctors sharing that information. The plan was to actually do this project with my whole class of students, but because it was something so new to me and something that was going to be so student-led, I ended up deciding to do it with my ELT. But these students ended up doing really well. All of my students took a pre-test on genetics. Basically, with the project, they had to identify if the disease was a genetic disorder or if it was just something caused by any other kind of pathogen, and they deemed it to be maple syrup urine disease, which is interesting if you take a second to Google it. And it's a genetic disorder. It's more commonly found in Mennonite communities and even Amish communities since they're so similar, and there's very little genetic diversity there. But my students in my extended learning class scored an average of a 61 on the genetics pretest, and after completing this project, they had an 82. So they had that increase of about 21 points compared to the control group's pretest, which was a 56, and they only increased by 15 points to a 71. So overall, the students who completed this project had a higher increase in their scores, which reflects with our goal. Our goal is to increase students' scientific content knowledge, and then to hopefully improve their Georgia Milestone Science test scores as a result, since they theoretically understand the material better. So That's my capstone. It was very interesting. It's something I want to do again and I want to better master in the future. Thanks so much.